Hello, everybody. How are you all doing?
Good, thank you.
Good. Can you all hear me and see the screen?
Yes, we can.
Wonderful, wonderful. All right. Well, welcome, welcome. We're so excited. Um, this is going to be a short webinar, seminar, but we will have opportunities to ask questions and so on at the end. But you can also ask me during the presentation. And as the title states, we'll be talking about threats, attacks, vulnerabilities, and some of the essentials of Security Plus. So, I don't know if how many of you are intending to continue and get Security Plus or not, but I think everybody in this world, everybody, with no exception, even little children, need to have some sense of cybersecurity sense, some basic understanding of cybersecurity, because we are potentially, all of us are potentially can be victims, and and it is really on all of us to protect ourselves, and to protect our organizations. So I hopefully this will be a very short introduction, but still, hopefully, it will get some of your interest and so on. And I myself was not a cybersecurity person. I was an engineer and a programmer and so on. And I'm so glad that this is what I do right now. Yeah. So welcome again. My name is Mehmet. Mehmet Kılınç, and actually, I will put my information in the chat. I will give you my full name, my telephone number, uh, and my personal email. Okay, so you can, and if you have any questions after this, and you need to contact me, feel free. Um, well, I'm so happy, Rob. It's so nice to see that. Thank you. Appreciate it. All right. So and I have my own company, but I do a lot of classes for training camp. I love teaching. Um, I have 30 plus certifications. I'm very good at taking tests, but I've been doing cybersecurity for a long, 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 long time. Okay. So anyway, and we're really going to have a session, a time for a QA session, and then some recommendations for you afterwards. Um, but I'm glad you're here. Hopefully, you will enjoy the next few hours. Okay. And if you have questions again, don't hesitate to ask. Don't hesitate to ask. So how's everybody doing? Glad you took part of your afternoon to do this. Yeah,
Friday,
go
we
ahead.
have to be doing pretty good, right? It's Friday.
Yes, it is Friday. Yeah, absolutely right. Absolutely. So, we're going to first, we'll talk about threat actors. So I don't know if you all know this or not, but CompTIA is the organization that has all these certifications that has a plus at the end, like A plus, Network plus, Security plus, CYSA plus, and Linux plus, and plus, 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 whatever. So they're highly regarded organization. And many of the slides for this class were taken from official Security Plus class. So you get sort of the feel of the what would the real class would be. But you're going to talk about some of the important stuff here. And I think the nice thing about cybersecurity, um, it will apply to everybody. So good question, Joe. A minimum of 2 hours, maximum of 3 hours. Okay, so between 2 and 3 hours. Okay, and and if you don't, if you have other things to do, that's okay. I will try to cover most of the material in 2 hours, right? So I am sure if I ask you, each one of you, you could tell me a story that happened to you. Somebody tried to, you know, to fraud you from your money, or somebody tried to scam you, or I'm sure you inherited some prince's, wealth from some other country in the world, and so on and so on. It's so funny. I have won the lottery so many times without even ever buying a ticket, and but I had many times, uh, people trying to. I actually had fraudulent charges in my credit cards. People try to use my resources, my network to do things, my bank account. I had to reset things. So I'm not unique. I'm sure this happened to many of you. So we're going to talk about threat actors and threats and stuff like that. But, if somebody asks me, what is a two-word definition of cybersecurity, I would say it is risk management. Okay. So risk management by far is the most important thing for us. Okay. And the way we get to risk is impact. Impact is a negative impact. If something negative happens, times likelihood. So we usually try to prioritize these risks, and we deal with it based on that priority. And if any of you ever lived in Atlanta, Atlanta traffic is pretty risky, because what? Likelihood of having an accident in Atlanta is so much higher than many other parts of the country. Okay. Did any of you this morning worry about getting hit by a comet or a meteor or something? I bet you not. And the reason is why? Even though impact is high, the likelihood is pretty low. I mean, we never worry about earthquake in Atlanta because what? This is not an earthquake zone. Okay. So therefore the risk is always impact times likelihood. Impact is what would be the actual negative consequence of if an incident happens. If the hackers were able to get into our database, if the hackers were able to get into our bank account and withdraw our money. These are all what? The negative impact. And then we multiply this with the likelihood and we get our risk. But the risk only happens this way is risk if we have assets. And we have something called vulnerabilities. Vulnerabilities are actually our weaknesses in our systems. And the threat actors actually try to take advantage of those weaknesses. If any of you are using Windows 7, I think you should stop. Why? Well, Microsoft said they are not supporting it. So that means what? There are tons and tons and tons of known vulnerabilities that the hackers know about, and nobody's doing anything about it. So that means what? It's likely that somebody's going to come and exploit that. So the threat actors are the ones who exploit those weaknesses. So if I reduce my weaknesses, what am I doing to risk? I am reducing the level of risk. If I'm removing the threat actors, then what's happening? Again, I'm reducing the risk. Why do you think when you go to a store, gas station or something, they say we don't hold no more than $100 in our safe? What are they trying to do? Say, hey, look, if you're going to try to rob us, all you're going to get is most probably at most is $100. So they are removing a lot of the threat actors by doing this. So threats are, it's so vulnerabilities are exploited by the threats. This slide is very, very important concept. Okay. Have you heard of this before? Any of you? All right.
Yeah.
Good.
Yes.
So we have known threats versus adversary behaviors. So known threats, and we have internal threats and external threats. And what we have is today we believe the internal threats are much bigger issue than external threats. Of course, we have external threats, and we actually have something that's even more. We have these advanced persistent threats, actors, and so on. But we need to understand who our enemies are. If we don't understand them, then how are we going to, if we don't understand their methods and what they are doing and what their motivation is, we need to, then we will not be able to respond to this. So insiders are threat because what? They have access. And insider threat doesn't mean it's all malicious. I'm sure you have seen this, somebody internally makes a mistake, a big mistake. That mistake causes company thousands and thousands of dollars. And they didn't have any bad intention. It was just, and so it's because they already have access. Now, if they have bad intentions, then we are in big trouble. But still, are there ways to protect this? Yes. Yes. Like something called, concept of least privilege. Any of you heard of this? Least privilege means what? Giving somebody only the right level of access, no more, no less. So if something happens, uh, if something happens, then it's only limited. The damage is limited. Okay. All right. So I got an important question saying, can we share these slides? I am not 100% sure. I'll find out. But I know that this session is being recorded, so I don't know if these recordings are going to be available to you all or not. So I'm not 100% sure, but I'll find out. Good question. All right. So we have different levels of sophistication and different level of capabilities. But whatever we do in cybersecurity is we need to prioritize, because no organization has unlimited resources. Even the federal government, who can print money, doesn't have unlimited resources. So since we don't have unlimited resources, that means what? We need to be effective and efficient. Effective meaning what? We need to be able to solve the issues, but also we need to do it in a way optimized with the minimal cost, with the minimal use of resources. Okay. So we have these low capacity actors, who are we call script kiddies. They just follow instructions. Well, those are easier to defend against. But then we have a lot of these people who have high capabilities, almost every military in the world right now has what? A cyber division. They're all using this as a form of, advantage, and they attack and so on. Then the military assets, political assets, and companies, these advanced persistent threats are, they attack and attack and attack. They have the resources, they have the funding, and then, they are there. They do it for months and months and months. Okay. So we need to understand their motivation. Sometimes it's what we call the crime of opportunity. It's there, they just do it. But sometimes it is political. Sometimes, it's for an hacktivism. They are doing it because of something. I actually did not realize this until I had a customer. I knew it in theory, but I had a customer, law firm, who represented some of the worst people in the world. Yeah. So they were such a big target. They were bigger target than many the government departments. I could not believe it, but it was so bad. Because a lot of people were doing this because of political activism. They say if you're representing these bad people, then you're bad yourself. I don't necessarily agree with this, but that was the case. So, but I would say 80-90% of the motivation is what? Money. So if we can reduce this motivation and make it financially good for them, then we can try to reduce some of this. Like, for example, instead of holding on to the customer's credit card information in our databases, we can hold on to their reference numbers. If the hacker hacks in and gets the reference numbers, that transaction ID, what good is that going to do them? Nothing, very little. See, by doing this, what did we do? We just reduced the motivation of the attacker. Okay. But sometimes there's not that much to do. So we have these lone hackers. I don't think they exist much anymore. White hat versus black hat. Have you heard of these hats? White hat hacker is really somebody who's authorized to do it. They have permission, like penetration testers. Black hats they do not. There is actually something called gray hat, where what I call, these are the confused people. They haven't decided if they're good or bad yet. They use their skill set sometimes for good and sometimes for bad. And then we have the unskilled attackers. Really, we worry very little about them, because with little control, we can stop these. Okay. They're called script kiddies because they're just following somebody's script. They're just following somebody's playbook. Okay. But these hacker teams and hacktivism, I'm sure you hear these. Oh, this team, because of some political thing, they're upset, and then they go hack this newspaper or this bank and stuff like that. And that motivation is actually stronger than many times financial motivation. So why do we care about motivation of the attackers? Well, if you understand their motivation and if you remove that motivation, then what happens? Or you reduce that motivation, then you are improving your security. But today, it's not anymore what we used to see in the movies, where we had some kid sitting in the basement of their house or something. No, it's now nation states. Many years ago, I was sitting in a conference and they showed us. They say, "Hey, this is not some factory in China. This is the Chinese soldiers sitting in front of the computers." And it's not just China anymore, it's what every nation has this. Okay. High capability, advanced persistence rate. They are constantly attacking. They have the resources, they have the skill sets, and they just do it, you know. And once they get in, they try to escalate their privileges. They try to give themselves more access, and then they try to pivot to move to other areas. One of the most interesting cases I worked with was after they were successfully able to get in, they started patching the victim system to do what? So that the others couldn't come in. I could not believe it, but it makes sense. It makes sense. Okay, espionage, you know, intellectual property, going after intellectual property. This is going quite a bit, and now it's even organized crime is part of it, and competitors. They are trying to have business advantage. It's really, you know, it's so much easier to rob a bank remotely than going and doing it, you know, with a gun and so on premise. Okay, so it is pretty impressive that, I mean, actually, I'm using the word impressive is kind of bad, but the way they work, I have looked. Any of you heard of ransomware? You know how they like encrypt your data and hold your data ransom? Some of these attackers, ransomware attackers, but you know, they hire legitimate penetration testers, and these penetration testers think that they are actually doing a testing on you know, legitimate tests, but in reality, they are actually using them to hack into the system. They actually hack into insurance companies to see who might actually pay if they got the ransom. Don't know if I should be sad or happy about this. It's pretty bad, actually. So they have a lot of skills, but what are they doing is they're using the skills for the wrong. So malicious insider and unintentional insider, both of these are an issue. And that bottom item there, shadow IT, to me today is one of the greatest issues. Do anybody know what shadow IT is? Anybody heard about it? This? So shadow IT means unauthorized purchase of IT, software, hardware, and so on. So we have a customer who's medical customer. They called us. They said, "Hey, one of our employees has lost their iPad." He said, "Okay." We went through our asset management program and we said, "There is no such iPad. Where did this come from?" And then they did some investigation. It turned out the sales manager decided to buy an iPad for everybody in the organization and never had any kind of authorization, and it was not being monitored and so on. They got lucky because there was no special data on that iPad. There were no patient records or anything. But it could have been, you know, very serious. Okay? So you know, so even though it's unintentional, they don't want to do harm, but you know, even this can be combated. How can you combat unintentional insider threat? Education, creating awareness, you know, say, hey, you cannot just bring your home router here. If there's an issue with Wi-Fi, you let us know. Okay? Exactly. Education and monitoring, absolutely correct. And also good design. You know, if you make people work 12 hours a day, every day, what's going to happen? You're going to have more accidents. If you put the emergency shut off button right next to an elevator button, what are you going to have? Somebody's going to press that button. All right. So we need to understand these threats and threat actors, and we need to reduce that threat levels, and then also remove some of their motivation. But there is something called an attack surface. Attack surface is all different ways an attacker might be able to get into a system. So, for example, if it is your building, your house, well, an attacker might come in from the door, or they might come from the window, or they might come from, I don't know, back door, whatever. They might even come through the wall. You know, I had somebody broke into my facility. They used a sledgehammer and broke the wall, back wall, and got it. So those are all different ways an attacker might come. So what we do is actually there is something, especially when we write programs, there's something called a data flow diagram, where the data is starting from and where it is going and how is it coming back. You know, so if you look at where the data is stored, data at rest, where the data is being moved, data in motion, and where the data is actually being processed. And we look at all of these places, and then we say both physical, you know, where is the server room, you know, and how can they be able to get into it? We use login and passwords and stuff like that. So we look at that, all of this, and what do you think we want to do as a cybersecurity professional? We want to reduce this attack surface. So we want to reduce this attack surface all the time. Usually it doesn't get reduced, usually it gets grown more. You say, you know what, can we also add this to it? Anytime you say, do you know what, we want to add this, what are you doing? You're actually growing the attack surface. But we need to manage the attack surface too. And this is where we look at the vulnerability of these systems. Okay. Again, vulnerability means weakness, faults in code, design, or anything. Can we ever have a system that is perfect? Absolutely not. Even if people think that they have a perfect system, they don't. Even if people think that they are perfect, they are not. And we are humans. Human, by definition, is what? Has some, you know, fault with it. Yeah, arrogance is definitely a big vulnerability. I agree with you 150%. Yeah. I actually dealt with some companies. We had no issues. We never had any incident. Really? Say, instead of saying you don't have incidents, just say you say that you're not aware of any incidents. So if we scan something and then we don't find any vulnerability, it's not because we don't have any weaknesses. It's because the system that we're using to do the scanning actually is weak itself. It doesn't know because it only looks at things that it only knows about. Okay. So we want to make sure, I just gave you an example a few minutes ago. We should never ever keep on insist on using Windows 7 because what Microsoft said, I'm not supporting it anymore. So if there are any new vulnerabilities, what will happen? They can be easily exploited. We have client base versus agents list. You know, when you actually, agent really means it's a small program running on that system to do that monitoring. An agent list is nicer, but you get less out of it. Okay. Should we do automation or should we do things manually? The answer is yes. We should do main automation, but we should also do what? Some manual. Okay. All right, network. You know, so things are, even if you're running in an application, almost every application today is what? Network based. It is not just on that computer, it is on some network. Okay. So we're going to have, you know, remote versus local exploits. You know, they can come from outside to do exploits. They could be on the other part of the world and attack you. I mean, I love internet. I mean, who doesn't love internet? But what did internet do? Well, it brought the world together Including what? Including the criminals. It made crime more available, just like it made anything else more available. So direct access, physical. And I bet you if I go to your facilities today and I look at your drop ceilings, what am I going to find? I'm going to find a bunch of loose cables, isn't it? Remote, wireless. I mean, who controls the air? Does anybody want to guess what is the distance that how far from away they can hack into a wireless network? More than 100 miles. Physically, more than 100 miles. Of course, not at every location, but they usually use satellite dishes and things like that. Default credentials. You'll be surprised how many routers we go and look into. The password is the password that came out of the box. Do people change the passwords? You know, I mean, if there's one thing that I learned in over decades and decades of doing this was what convenience wins over security. If things are more convenient, people just pick the more convenient stuff. Anybody heard of ports? TCP, UDP ports? These are networking ports that if they are open, that means what somebody can actually exploit them. Lure-based vectors, bait them, tempt them, removable devices, you drop them in a place and humans are curious. They find something in the floor, what do? You know, when my children were young, they just put it in their mouth. And later on, actually, one of my sons used to put it in his eyes all the time, whatever he found. But what happens when you get older? You start putting it into your laptop. Terrible idea. Terrible idea. Trojans, I'm sure you heard of the story, you know. You think you're getting a nice gift, but in it were the soldiers attacking them. The same, you download some program, you think it's doing something good, and in reality, it's taking over your computer. But what I'm finding today, the most popular ones, these are these macro and scripting viruses. So you download an Excel, you say, oh, this Excel has nothing in it. So you let it go. But in reality, what's in that Excel? Some malicious content. Okay. And the scripting is, you know, the operating systems are very good at scripting nowadays. You know, Linux was always good, but now Windows also has PowerShell and so on. It's a regular plain text file, but this text file can cause more damages than the other things. And then image files, you know, and is another, you get an image, it looks, you think, oh, you got it, but it's a whole bunch of malware comes with it. How do they send it? Well, they send it by email. Okay, that's old. They still do it, but we're now getting text messages and we're getting instant messages. And then the social media. I mean, a lot of people fall for a lot of fake things. And you're getting voicemail. Lately, my social security number has been disabled. How do you disable a social security number? I don't know. But I got these calls. They say, hey, your social security number has been disabled. If you don't do this and this, you know, if you don't pay us this, it's going to remain disabled. Very interesting, huh? Did any of you get that? Did your social security number get disabled? We used to fight over calls from Microsoft. If Microsoft called, we wanted to take turns and we wanted to be the ones to talk to them. But we're getting it from all different ways. This is, believe me, this is not new. We used to get it by regular mail. Now we're getting it through, and all of these new ways forms of attacks. And supply chain. Well, what is one thing that we learned from COVID? Is we thought we had good, supply chain system, and then we realized the importance of the security of our supply chain. If a manufacturer of a critical item is attacked, then everybody who relies on that is in trouble. If a oil processing, whatever refinery is that has an issue, then we all suffer from, whatever. I mean, you go ask car manufacturers. They couldn't manufacture cars for years because of what? Some chips that was not available. Okay. So that's why actually what there are new legislations saying that certain things are mission critical and they have to be maintained and they have to be made in US and things like that. Okay. Very, 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 very important. Right. Social engineering. This is one of the main reasons where we have to do annual security review with the whole organization. And you'd be surprised what people are falling for. Something at gmail.com, and they spoof the name to the CEO of the company. And this lady goes to Kroger's and buys Google gift cards and scans the numbers and sends it to them. Would not believe it. She paid it out of her pocket. And then after she ran out of money, she went to her manager saying, CEO is still asking for it. What should I do? How do you fall for this? Well, I know they did because I was there when they fell for it. And the thing about this is, 1 in million is a very low percentage for success, isn't it? 1 in million. Well, 1 in million for phishing is actually not too bad. You send an email to 1 million people and you're able to trick only one of them. How much does it cost you to send a million emails? Not a lot of money, isn't it? Okay. So we have to be right all the time. They have to be right what? Just just 1 in 1,000, 1 in whatever, who will consider 1 in 1,000 to be a good success rate? Well, it's a very good success rate for phishing attack. So we need to. That's why this human factor is the most critical factor. It really by far is the most critical factor. Because what's going to happen to technology? Technology changes. The form of their attack is going to change. We need to make sure that we create this generation of people who has this awareness, and hacking the human, or we can say they call it wetware, like it's the human itself. So they will try. It's so easy. Why try to crack a password when you can just ask and they will give it to you? So one day I went to this company's VP. I do this a lot with VPs. I say, hey, can I have your password? The guy didn't know his password, so he started shouting. He says, Wendy, what is my password? I said, what are you doing? Stop, please. What do you think Wendy did? She shouted back his password to him. I said, oh boy. So constantly we need to make sure we train people, create this awareness, because this is the easiest thing to do. Okay. The emails, the scenarios, saying, hey, I'm stuck here, I'm done this, and so on, So impersonation, pretending to be someone else, pretexting. I'm sure you got these messages saying, I'm stranded in this island and I need this and I lost all my credit cards and such and such. They make it really sound realistic, isn't it? I'm some prince here and I'm trying to get money out of this country and I need this and that. So a lot of this kind of stuff is there. And then there's the phishing, where it is done by email, phishing done by voicemail, smishing is done by messages, and farming is where you're sending people to, and like instead of doing one at a time, you do it as a farm. You redirect and try to catch things from there. And then there's typo squatting, like whitehouse.gov. Instead of whitehouse.gov, you put whitehouse.com. For a long time, whitehouse.com was it's a bad site. But the one that I have seen recently was fafsa.org or fafsa.com. If you know what FAFSA is, financial aid, I still teach at the colleges, so I know. And they trick him like with this. Or, you type Dell with 3 L's. And so these are all, cousin domains and things like that is trying to capture people's. So we need to be careful. Yes. Okay. And then business emails. I'll tell you that one thing that bothers me quite a bit right now is the colleges. What does a poor college kid want? Job or scholarship? So they send them an email, say, hey, there's a job fair and they're going to be hiring right on the spot. Click here to register. They click there. As soon as they click there, what? They're already been, the malware is already introduced into their system. This is called actually not phishing. This is called spear phishing. They are doing targeted attack to that group. And there's something called whaling. Whaling is going after the C-suite. And the people who came up with the name did not realize that whale is not a fish. Whale is a mammal, but that's okay. All right. How are we doing? Is this okay? Is this pace okay? Good. All right. So we will, yeah. What I if you is maybe we'll go about another 10, 15 minutes and we'll take a maybe short 5-minute break, and then not long, and then we'll continue, and then after that I will open it up to questions and so on. Okay. All right. So vulnerabilities again. We talked about if I reduce threats, I'm going to reduce risk. If I reduce vulnerabilities, I'm going to reduce risk also. Now, the part of the problem with the vulnerabilities is, do we always know what is the problem with us? Do we always know about the weakness in our system? We don't, because there's something called actually 0-day that we do not know about. Now, device and OS vulnerabilities. So our devices, even if it is a Mac, even if it says Mac on it, there are some vulnerabilities on it. Operating systems have millions and millions and millions of lines of code. It is impossible for it to be perfect. It's just impossible. So how come then Macs seem to be more secure than Windows? Yes, you can get CPEs for this class, absolutely. absolutely. So, and I'm going to give you an email address that you can, should I put it right now? It's help desk at trainingcamp.com, and then you can use it there. Yeah, so Joe, you do have a good point. It is configuration is more tightly controlled because what? They own the hardware and they own the software. Okay. And the second thing is, look, we need to have vulnerabilities and we need to also have exploits. Well, since there are so many less of something, then what happens? It gets less exploited. Therefore, it is a little bit more secure. There are a lot more windows out there. Therefore, what? It's going to be more exploited. But your point about controlling the hardware and software, especially for the phone, makes a big difference. So there we are going to have vulnerabilities. And therefore, what do we need to do? We need to constantly update it. We need to patch it. We need to make it, fix those security updates are the fixes to those vulnerabilities. Okay. We have these legacy systems. This is one of the biggest issues in our IT world. There is something called, actually, people tell me this: if it is not broken, don't fix it. That is not a bad concept, but it doesn't apply very well to cybersecurity because they think things are not broken, but in reality, the fact that physically it is still functioning doesn't mean it is not broken. And trying to convince them of this is not very easy. End of life system. End of support and end of life should come at the same time. Firmware. Anybody know what's a firmware? Firmware is a software that controls the hardware. So we're going to have weaknesses with this. So, when you buy a Cisco switch, well, most of it is going to be on the firmware. Okay. Virtualization, huge thing we have nowadays. We're using cloud and we have tons and tons of virtual machines. Whatever the vulnerabilities we have under the native operating system is there, plus on top of it, that the virtualized version of that operating system has everything that that operating system already has also, and application vulnerabilities. And this is one area, honestly, as an industry, we are not doing a good job. Today, 80% of the attacks come from the applications. And we just want it to work. We say, let's make it work first, and then let's make it secure afterwards. Well, is that a good idea? How about we build the house and then let's just make it, then we will make the foundation better. No, you first make the foundation better, then you put the house on top of that strong foundation. Right, so I mentioned this earlier, 0 day. What is a 0 day? Something that we didn't know about. So we didn't we find out, and unfortunately, when do we find out? When somebody gets victimized. Okay. So we are getting better because we are using systems that are more behavior based also. Okay. So you might not know that there's something wrong, but you will know that there is a problem because what? There's too much network traffic, or more memory usage, or more CPU usage, and things like that. And our body temperature. If it is 101, what do you know? You know that there is something wrong. Do you always know what that something wrong is? Not really. Okay. But we do know. So we can do some of these, but 0 days is not something we like. right? And misconfiguration, very, very serious. Yeah. I can create the greatest rules in the world, and then somebody can come and disable that device. What happens to my great rules? No use. Okay. So we need to make sure we understand these rules. And then cryptographic vulnerabilities. Well, eventually, what's going to happen to all encryption algorithms? They're going to get deprecated. How come? Because we're getting better and stronger computers. So we want to use encryption algorithms that's been tested and vetted and known to be good. Okay. And we want to use keys that are random as possible. If you have predictable keys and the keys are not long enough, and or they are using bad algorithm, all of these can be easily broken and easily, we can find out the password very easily. Okay. Side loading, rooting, jailbreaking, these are all for what? Mobile devices. Side loading means what? You're loading the application not through the store, but through another means, meaning what? You're not going through that checks, security checks to make sure that this application is actually meets those minimum security requirements. And rooting and jailbreaking, one is for Android, the other one is for iPhone, is what? Taking the original operating system on that device and then removing all those built-in securities. And right after that, you can start getting stuff from anywhere. Very, very serious issues. I know some people like this because they think it gives them more power, and it does. But then there's less checks. And when you have less checks, what's going to happen? Well, they'll break into that system. So here's an example of an F droid. Yeah. And so on. Okay. All right. Application and cloud vulnerabilities. So application, we could spend a whole week on this. This is really one area. Again, I'm a little passionate about this area because this is an area that we can put in more and more and more effort. We are way behind on this. Race conditions means when two processes are racing each other to get to the same data. Time of check versus time of use. Time of check is when you log into a site. Time of use is when you are actually trying to do something from there. So if you go to Gmail, you go check your email, and then you close the browser. And then you open the browser, another browser again, and you type in Gmail. What's going to happen? It's going to take you back to the Gmail that was there. Okay? This is time of use, but this is very dangerous because what should people really do? They should log out after each time that they are done with something. Okay? Are people going to do that? Not likely. Because what? Because convenience wins over security. Injection attacks, where they inject SQL commands and things like that. Buffer overflow. You have a field that has 10 characters for a name. Instead of 10 characters, they type in 15 characters. What happens to those extra 5 characters? Well, hopefully those 5 characters are dropped, but not as everybody does that. So it starts to do arbitrary code execution. Type safe means when we have something that's integer, we keep it as an integer. We don't switch between integers and real numbers or integer and actual strings and things like that. And then very serious one too, malicious update. So you get an update. You think your system is not better. In reality, you just made it worse. Evaluation scope. Say, okay, what are we going to do? Security testing, documentation review. secure code analysis, configuration. So you're saying, okay, what are the different ways we can actually look at this to do? This is not as important as some of the previous slides that we talked about, but definitely we need to look at this. A very, very popular attack. Web application attacks, because what? A lot of the applications themselves are web-based. Okay. If you ever want to learn more about these, I'm going to put a site here. It's owas.org. Okay. So when you have time, go look at their top 10 projects and things like that. They don't just show you how these are done. They show you also what to do. Cross-site scripting, cross-site forgery, and SQL injection, and buffer overflow. But I will tell you, the number one control that is going to fix most of our problems is something called input validation. Input validation, to make sure that every input we get in an application, we actually validate to make sure that it's what it's supposed to be. Well, cloud is very popular, and it needs to be. But what is the big problem with cloud? It makes it more accessible. It really makes it more accessible. Okay. So, host on the cloud, there's actually cloud as an attacks platform, and cloud access brokers. And then finally, the supply chain. We talked about some of this already, but there's quite a bit of risk, especially third-party risk, that every organization needs to be very careful. They need to measure it carefully, and then try to, deal with them. Am I going a little too fast for some of these things? If I am, you can let me know. But again, this is not supposed to be an thing where you all like become a Security Plus. There's no way you'll be ready for Security Plus in 2 hours. This is, Security Plus, I believe, is a 4-day class. But we're trying to touch to the main key points without losing your interest, I hope. Okay. So let's take a 5-minute break, and let's make it 7 minutes. Let's come back at 3:05, and then when we come back at 3:05, we will finish all the rest of the topics that we were planning to finish, and then I will open up to you all. Okay. See you back. All right. Let's continue. So we have the threats, vulnerabilities. We need to identify these vulnerabilities. How do we identify vulnerabilities? The best thing to do is to do a vulnerability scan. And the vulnerability scans are, you know, there are different tools out there. There's Qualys, Nessus. It looks like there's Greenbone. Whatever that you scan, and then you see, it will look at. Yeah, we need to always do our defensive thing and then find out what we have. Try to reduce all of these vulnerabilities. By reducing this, we are reducing the risk to the organization. So again, Nessus and Qualys are the most widely used ones, but Nessus has their open source version of it. It's called OpenWAS. And what they do is they learn from OpenWAS so that they can feed that information into their Nessus application. Okay? And so there are also, it's not enough just to do the vulnerabilities. We want to have this intelligence feed into our system about new threats. So there are other tools out there. There are a lot of tools out there. You know, IBM has X-Force, but there is very famous thing that's called MITRE ATT&CK that gives us a lot of tools about the known threat methods, so that we can try to work on the common known threats, because it's almost impossible to do a full-blown threat modeling, because we cannot plan for every possible type of attack, but we should be ready for the common ones. Okay? And there is, of course, the dark web and the deep web, and and where a lot of malicious activities are done. So I used to work for a company called SecureWorks. I don't know if any of you heard of them, but SecureWorks is one of their big thing is they are very good at cyber intelligence. So they had hundreds of people spending a lot of time on the dark web to collect intelligence information and then take that information and feed it into their customers, to the customer base. So there is something called penetration testing, and this is different than vulnerability testing. In a vulnerability testing, we are looking at and seeing what vulnerabilities we might have. It's like saying, okay, you are low in calcium, or potassium or whatever. The penetration test doesn't say you have those vulnerabilities. It says that those vulnerabilities can actually be exploited. So somebody comes, takes on those, discovers what is there, and takes on those vulnerabilities, and they're able to actually exploit those vulnerabilities. So successful penetration test is a test where we have shown that there is an vulnerability. Okay. But unsuccessful penetration test is like proving the negative. Can you ever prove the negative? Not really. I can tell the whole world, hey, say, there's a pen in this room, and here it is. But if I look for a pen and cannot find a pen, I cannot say that there is no pen in this room. All I can say is I couldn't find a pen in this room. Okay. So, we talked about black hat and white hat. Now we have black box, white box, and gray box. Black box means we don't know anything about it. White box means we know everything about it. Gray box means we know some things about it. So the worst situation is when we have a black hat doing white box. They know everything and their intentions are bad. But we want to keep all the black hat people to be black box. And there are now some bug bounty programs. So what are the companies doing? Companies are turning the whole community into testers. And they say, anybody who finds something, here you go, you get an reward. And by doing this, they're really growing their big workforce. All right, vulnerability analysis. Like we said before, we need to prioritize. We don't have unlimited resources. So what we do is we go do our scans. We come up with a list of available, known vulnerabilities. And there is a national vulnerability database that can help us with this. And there is a scoring system called CVSS. And if the number is high, that means it's very bad, high critical. If the number is low, that means a pretty low risk. Okay. There's also CVEs, common vulnerability and exposure. And these are part of the actually NVD. And we need to use all of these as a resource to feed into our organization. We don't have the time or the resources to do our own cyber intelligence. Look, you can be sure for this. All the cyber intelligence companies are each other's customers. They all buy and sell intelligence to each other, and they all have to do this. Well, when we go ahead and scan things, find things, sometimes it's going to be false positive. I mean, sometimes it's going to be false negative. Do you know what the positive means on the scanning side? Positive means we think that there is something wrong. And negative means we don't think there is anything wrong. False positive means we thought there was something wrong, and in reality, we just wasted our time. True positive means, well, we thought there was something wrong, and in reality, there is something. False negative by far is the worst, because false negative means what? We don't think there's anything wrong, but in reality, we have an intruder, we have an incident. And how do we find out something is false negative? After the impact, after we suffer the consequences of the impact. So, pretty serious. Pretty serious. All right. So we have different vulnerability analysis, but what we want to do, again, we said this several times, we want to prioritize. So we want to classify vulnerabilities. Actually, we want to do classification of our assets. We want to classify our threats. We want to classify our vulnerabilities. We want to classify our risks. So we want to do classifications in all of these because it helps us prioritize. And so so that's something that, classification, prioritization, and then we say, okay, this is, and where do we get that from? We just talked about it earlier, CVSS. There's a score. We come up with this, and then every organization really needs to come up with what their what is more critical to them and what's not. They decide what is an acceptable level of risk, what is not an acceptable level of risk for them. And so once we find a vulnerability, then what do we do? Many times what we do, if it's a software-based things, we do patching. We apply the updates that's available. And then sometimes what we do is, it should have been in the slide, we fix the configuration issues. Yeah. So and sometimes things are unnecessarily running there. We take away things that are not necessarily. So misconfigure things, we configure them properly. Things that are unnecessary, we need to remove them. Then we do these other things. We might say, hey, we need an insurance. Segmentation, separation, isolation is always a great idea. And then there's this term called compensating control. When the control itself doesn't do the job, you come up with an assistant control, compensating control that makes up for the failure of the primary control. Yeah. Then sometimes you exceptions and exemptions. Sometimes you just say, what? I'm okay with this. I understand that there is this risk, but I'm going to accept it, take it on because what? Because I need it, because the reward is too high. Sometimes when the reward is too low, what do? You say, hey, I don't need this. I'm just going to let it go, and you're going to avoid that risk. All right, malware. First of all, do you know what makes malware a malware? It's not the impact. It is not the impact. What makes a malware is intent. If the intent was malicious, then it is malware. If somebody intended to write bad code, and attack our system and they were not able to do anything, it's still a malware. If our own developers really messed up and and we have more damage than any malware, then that's not a malware because it's just bad code. So let's look at some of the indicators. So we need to also classify malware. Why do we classify it? We need to classify it and categorize it, because we need to prioritize also. We need to also prioritize. So there's a kind that, unfortunately, this name became synonymous with all malware. It is not. Not all malwares are viruses. And the big difference between a virus and a worm is virus needs our help, worm does not need our help. So, it needs to have some kind of interaction with the subject. It could be in the memory, it could be in the boot, it could be as a script, but, and so we just need to make sure that, we realize where it is, how it is attacking, and then and a lot of the way we stop and virus from attacking is not necessarily anti-malware software, but actually it is the user awareness. So the worms, unfortunately, for your computer to get infected by a worm, only thing you need is your computer to be on. If your computer is on, you're going to get infected if it is vulnerable to a worm. Okay. So because it's self-propagate, not self-replicate. They also have self-replicate, but it is self-propagate. And then fireless malware is very difficult to detect. Okay? Remote execution, So it's not a file, it's running things from remotely. And spyware, adware, keyloggers, very interesting topic. You know, isn't Google spy on us, and then based on those spying, don't they send us ads? So aren't they then malware? The answer is no. Why not? First of all, we gave them permission. And second is this was not their intent. Their intent is not to cause harm. Yes, they are stealing our information, not stealing, they're taking on our information and using it to do other things, but that is not, we gave them that permission. And then we have keyloggers that just capture whatever you're doing. Very, very serious. Backdoors. Backdoors are a little tricky because backdoors are created at the time of development in case something goes wrong, so you can enter it and stop it. But what needs to happen to backdoors? Like what needs to happen to all the temporary sheds and stuff like that that was created during the time of construction? Well, they need to be removed. So if the backdoor is not removed after it goes into production, then we have a big problem. Okay. But there is these rats, remote access trojans. These are devices that that's the software that can actually manage zombie computers, where it can be used to do an attack, especially denial of service attacks. Okay. And then rootkits are malware that is in the root of the operating system. So when that portion of it is encrypted, then we are in big, big, big trouble, because what happens? It's always coming on as an infected state. Very, very difficult situation. Okay. But the one that is becoming like crazy, growing big, is this ransomware. You know, they take your data, they encrypt your data, and then they hold your data hostage. And they demand on ransom payment so that they can release the keys so that you can decrypt your data. Pretty serious, isn't it? So its old name was really crypto malware, crypto virus. Okay. But there is one more that's called logic bombs. Logic bomb is if something happens, then do this. You know, many times insiders malware is an logic bomb. You know, at this date, trigger this program, or at this time do this. Okay. So we see that there's a lot of malicious activities going on. But my recommendation to you all is, if you find that something you're infected with something, okay, then go ahead and re-image instead of trying to get it clean. Because if you're trying to get it clean, you will be only able to clean just tip of the iceberg. Okay? Because today's anti-malware software is not very good. It actually misses more than it catches. So we don't want to take that risk. So therefore, what do? We want to make sure if we discover something, just take it out and re-image. Start cleaning next time. Start cleaning next time. So there's a lot more on malware. You know, we talked about early some macro viruses and, and scripting and so on. And usually many of them are what? Multiple of these. So they attack using this, and then they do it this way. They do it with email, and then they try to change their shape so that they are not easily detected and discovered, and so on. All right, physical and network indicators. I don't think we do a good job with physical security. I really don't think we do. So physical attacks and denial of service attack. When people ask me, oh, tell me about security, security is not that complicated. Denial of service attack, the attacker does not need to know. Only thing the attacker needs to know is your address. They just need to create enough traffic, actually more traffic that your system can handle, then you're in trouble. Environmental controls, RFID are those chips that we are putting in there to uniquely identify devices, but they can clone them and skim them to do what? Go and make it look like you have that another credit card that's just like it. Or that chip, so you think that there's another one of this, or you make it look like it is in here when it is really in there. A lot of reconnaissance attacks out there. There are a lot of scanning goes, port scanning and service scanning and things like that. And then credentials harvesting, trying to collect credentials. This even is happening even in like sites like LinkedIn. I see people say, oh, what is your favorite first grade teacher's name? Why do people want to know their first grade teacher's name? Because it's one of the password recovery solutions, questions. Denial of service, again, very, very, very easy. Let's say a popular singer is coming here to the local town and there's a concert, and you put in you go to a ticket site and the ticket site is down. Why? Because there was a higher demand than our system can actually handle. Can they do this as a form of attack? Of course they can. And they do, and it is very easy to do. And we have denial of service attacks and a distributed denial of service attack. The denial of service attack is saying, look, from a single attacker. Distributed denial of service attack is coming from many, many computers at the same time. Yeah. And earlier we talked about rats, if you remember. One of the things that they are used for distributed denial of service attacks. So there are really two major types of distributed service attacks. One is called a reflected attack. The other one is an amplified attack. Reflected means what? You send something and you get a lot of reflections back. So I send you one, you respond back with 10. Amplified is I'm sending it from beginning with many amplifiers. So every time I say something once, it looks like it's coming 10 times. But very, very difficult attack to stop also. Because how do you stop it? Let's say I have a physical building and people are upset with me and 200 people start protesting right in front of my building. What's going to happen? It's going to slow down my business and maybe even make me forced to shut it down for that day. Okay. Actually, slow down is a successful denial of service attack. I'm sure you heard of attack called man in the middle. Well, man in the middle is no longer appropriate, so we use the on-path attack, but it is actually better terminology because on-path is we are staying on the path. I know your car is going to go through this road, so I stay in the corner and watch the cars coming in. So you just need to look at what's coming on the path. And then, oops, sorry, domain name attacks. Domain name services is when we match a domain name to an IP address. So it's like a lookup table of IP addresses. You know, you have a domain name www.xyz.com, and then it says, okay, what when you type in XYZ, what happens? Well, the DNS says you go to this IP address, and that becomes the domain name services. Okay. And so there's DNS service, DNS poisoning, DNS client cache poisoning, server poisoning, and attack indicators. Most of these happen because of zone transfer. So one DNS server has zone of authority, another one has its own zone of authority. So you go from one, you say, okay, I need to get this information. It says, okay, what is that information? And it will send it to you from there. Okay. And so that is the so when you hear that 10,000 sites have been hacked at once, do you really think that they hacked into 10,000 different sites? No. No. So what happened? Well, what happened is, again, it changed the lookup table for all, 10,000 different, uh, you know, sites. Okay. So, and it's a very common attack. Okay. There is something called secure DNS, but secure DNS is about what? Making sure that we know that it's coming from the trusted location and that it has not been altered. It has not been altered. All right. Wireless attacks. I told you. You can look it up if you don't believe me. More than 100 miles away, it can be done. Because what? Once it's in the air, our wireless networks are transceivers. They can transmit and receive at the same time. So if the signal is in the air outside of your building, well, we just need to be able to get to that air from anywhere. And some of them have done it from more than 100 miles away. But we have these rogue access points, and very, very, very common because people don't like their signal strength, and they just go bring their own routers and so on, which is very dangerous. And denial of service attack is also possible by jamming and disassociation. Disassociation means, we get, every time we are using a wireless network, we get associated with the wireless access point. Disassociation means disconnecting that connection between those devices. Wireless replays and key recovery, much easier than wired network. And then password attacks. We have different types of We're trying to get into people's passwords. Again, we talked about the easiest one is not even in here. We talked about it earlier. Is what? Social engineering. You ask and they tell you. But there is a very common, very easy attack called a dictionary attack. Dictionary attack is not necessarily all the words that are in the dictionary. Dictionary attack is about common passwords. So they have taken all the common passwords and say, okay, what is it? And many times people's birthdays are their passwords, or their pets' names are their passwords. And addresses are their passwords. So we want to, and we realize this. Actually, when we do forensics, we take somebody's laptop and turn it into a dictionary about themselves. So easy password attack. But there is an attack that is going to work always, no matter what. Eventually is going to work. What is this attack called? It's called a brute force attack. Brute force attack means I'm going through all possible combinations to actually get to the password. Eventually, I will get to the password. That's why we ask people to change their passwords every so often. Do we tell people this is why we are changing their passwords? I don't think we do. And I think we should. I think we should tell them. I think we should tell them that, they should why we're asking them to do it. They still might not be happy about it, but at least we should tell them why we are doing this. There is another attack that is so easy to do and without breaking any encryption. You put in your username, password. I capture it. I have no idea what I captured. Because what? Maybe it's encrypted. But I don't know what it is, but I send it again. I send it exactly as it is again. Then what happens? Sometimes it will let me, actually it will let me log in, which is terrible. This means what? My system is vulnerable to replay attacks. Well, how do we stop replay attacks? We do it based on time. Make sure if every single content in our network is time stamped and it's based on time, then we'll have a lot less issues with it. Some other malicious code indicators: shellcode, credentials dumping, lateral movement, east and west. So they get into one system and then now they are trying to move into some other systems in there. And then persistence. They're putting in their schedule tags and registry keys and so on. So we need to monitor for all of those. So this is what I was going to cover. So I'm very close to 2 hours, but I wanted to tell you a few other things. So if any of you are ever interested in Security Plus, and I think Security Plus is a very good general cybersecurity certification. I think if this is the field you're thinking of going into, you should look into getting CISSP and CCSP and CISM and so on. And I teach all of those classes. But a good starting class that covers almost all the information in all of those classes is the Security Plus. Okay, and I'm sure you're aware of this. Training camp is in platinum partner, training partner with CompTIA. Okay. So this is training camps. The slides I was using for in this class today were mainly from official CompTIA material. So ISC Square uses their official material, and this is the site. If you're interested getting, I don't know any of the cost or the schedule. I have no idea about any of those things. But what I do know is training camp is one of the best in business to do this. And that's the site, and I'm going to put the link in here. But you also do have an option to do what? To do your own self-study. So you can go get things from their store, the CompTIA's store, and then you can have their courses bundles and then certifications and so on. And you can buy the books and and stuff like that. So they have all kinds of information there. And all of these organizations are about money, but CompTIA tries very hard to maintain its integrity. Okay. So I do need to give him a lot of credit for that. When I took Security Plus way back, I thought this was a joke. Today, Security Plus is not a joke. It's a very serious certification. And actually, a lot of people end up failing it. So I don't know if that's good or bad, but I think it's good for the test. But anyway, so I think I spoke quite a bit. So it's your time. Do you have any questions for me? Anything you'd like to ask? Or, about this or anything else for that matter. So anything, about Security Plus or any other certification or about this class or slides or special topic or whatever. And I'm going to put my numbers there again. And if you are ever in Georgia, stop by. I'm in Gwinnett County. And thank you, Jovina. And so if you're anybody from Georgia? Thank you. Oh, California, okay. Different time zone. Beautiful state. Texas, yeah, we have a lot of people from Texas. I actually go to Texas a lot to do classes. Washington State or Washington, D.C.? Okay. Beautiful state also. There's still like 3 states that I haven't been to. Vermont, New Hampshire, Minnesota, and of course Hawaii and Alaska. Well, I hope this was not waste of your time. I hope you learned something. And I think security is everybody's business, everybody. My grandson is 8 years old, and I try to, of course, you try to be nice. You want them to maintain their innocence, but they are using electronic equipment, so they need to be careful. All right, Scott. So you have seen everything except Alaska. So that's nice. It's nice. enjoy the rest of your day. If you have questions, I'll hang around few more minutes. Otherwise, uh, take care. Thank you. Thanks for taking time off today to do this. Thanks, Joe. Joe, I appreciate it. I will right after this, I'm going to call and ask both about the recording and the slides. But if you want, you can also contact helpdesk@trainingcamp.com to see. And I'm guessing that, I mean, there's a reason for recording. So, but because typically these classes are not recorded, so I'll find out. And if you want to email me, I can send you back a response too. So, Carla, you're most welcome. And you have my email, Carla. So I will find out very shortly. You're most welcome.